Well, I'm really grateful for my Methodist upbringing. My parents took us loyally to the Methodist Church, even though they found it a little bit wanting. What I found is community, and I was involved in the Methodist Church for a very long time because it brought community. I belonged to people. However, the philosophy eventually left me wanting, because it seemed like we were worshiping a great exception, and that we were basically a worm of the dust and never able to achieve that place of real joy, or even that we deserved that real joy. And so Ernest Holmes became one of my greatest teachers. And the religious science movement taught me a new idea. It was very scary. It was very foreign to me, but something was stirring within me. Something stirred and says, this makes more sense. He's not the great exception. He is the great example. Mm-hmm. And I began to examine scriptures a little bit differently. I began to see that never once does the man say, worship me, mm-hmm. but he says, follow me. Mm-hmm. And so Ernest Holmes introduced me to a path of following Jesus, the man mm-hmm. Jesus, and the Christ idea that he taught. Mm-hmm. And I began to have a stirring of that Christ essence that I could feel and know and taste within my own being. It was a logical journey to eventually want to pass that gift, that amazing concept and truth, to anybody who came into my field. Ministry has allowed me to do that.
Well, I was raised as a Baptist. As I said, my grandmother was the superintendent of the Sunday school for 32 years, so my entire childhood, she was the superintendent of the Sunday school, which meant I was in every class, I was in every pageant, every play, whatever, I had a part in it. So, and I enjoyed it. Not to say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy it, but as I got older, I started to have questions, and I couldn't get the answers that I wanted. And as a child, I was a good girl, but the only challenge I had was my mouth. I just had, if I got in trouble, it was something I said or a question that I asked. So that was a challenge for me. But as I kind of got older, I kind of just stopped going to church at one point altogether. And then after I had children, I felt the need to go back again and get them involved and that sort of thing. But one New Year's Eve, a friend of mine said, let's go to church. Let's go to the church my mother goes to. I said, fine, I don't have anything else to do. And we went to Hillside. And ironically, we got the last 2 seats because it was packed all the way. And we got the last 2 seats in the choir stand. And I listened to Dr. Barbara and I was like, that makes sense. And as I started going back to the services, I started getting some of the answers that I couldn't get before. Mm-hmm. And the things that didn't make sense to me, I got clarified through her lessons and through her teaching. And that's what made me know that that was the place for me. And so then I got in every class I could. And then the next thing I knew, she said to me one day, because I went to talk to her after service, and she just looked at me in her way, as only Dr. Barbara can. She said, get in the class. She was talking about the Barbara King School of Ministry. So I got in the ministry classes.
I was raised hardcore Assemblies of God Pentecostal in Southeast Texas. Mm-hmm. And I like to use the phrase divine discontent. Okay. That there was this divine discontent brewing inside of me, and when I really listened to what was being said by the time I was a teenager, I just couldn't comprehend that. And yet, as all of you probably experienced, I knew nothing else. So I didn't know there were any options. I just knew that I had to get away from that. And so I kind of basically came from nothing and studied really hard and got a journalism scholarship and thought, oh, that's my ticket out. And then my mother countered that with a divine revelation that I was supposed to go to Oral Roberts University, which meant 4 more years of what I had been raised in. And then when that was over, that's when I declared that I wanted nothing to do with God ever again. And I was free. Jump forward, I don't know, 8 years, and I'm in Los Angeles, and somebody that I went to Oral Roberts University with saw me and invited me to an evening in LA, and I thought it was church, and I was like, no. And it ended up being Louise Hay. And she was just getting started, and it was the first time, and I always like to ask people, do you remember the first time that you heard something different? And that was my first time. I heard that I was enough, and that was just amazing to me, that I was enough. I didn't have to earn anything. I didn't have to change anything. I just had to allow and accept. And that was my big paradigm shift. And after that, it was a long, beautiful, steady process of exploring what this philosophy was all about, thanks to her.
I was about 6 years old when my father left. We didn't know where he was. My mother and two brothers, we struggled financially. She was a seeker, and she found a little group with a woman minister in 1958, Ponce de Leon, Atlanta, Georgia. And it was positive, and it was wonderful. And I loved going to Sunday school there. And I was a good student. I was a great athlete. And my junior year in high school, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And senior year in high school, I was the captain of the football team, most valuable player. In the winter, I signed a full scholarship to a really great private university to play football. A couple of months after that, my mother died. I was at her side when she died. I graduated and was the outstanding senior in my high school, scholarship, everything. Went off to college to play football. I was miserable when I went. I was more miserable when I got there. I earned a starting position playing against the University of Alabama. In that game, I had a partially paralyzed neck and shoulder. Couldn't move my arm any higher than this or move my fingers. And the doctors told me it would never recover. You've torn two major nerves. And I dropped out of school and dropped out of life. I didn't feel that I could go on. I was in my private hell, dark, hopeless, helpless. Came back to Atlanta and crawled back to the Unity Church I'd grown up in. And what I found most of all was that 8-minute meditation on Sunday morning. For 8 minutes a week, I didn't feel miserable, hopeless, and helpless. And in time, the 8 minutes became 15 minutes, and the 15 minutes became 30. And after about 6 months, I woke up one morning and I said, you know, I'm not feeling miserable. What am I feeling? I must be feeling happy. And I knew that my neck and shoulder had recovered, and it had. Nothing has been impossible to me from them. It was also that the church took me in, and they believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And so I got back into school and was doing well, and honor student, and not back at the university I'd played football for, but back at Georgia State in Atlanta. And I said, what do I want to do with my life? I want to help people the way I've been helped. And so when I graduated with a degree in mathematics and minors in philosophy and psychology, went on to ministerial school, one of the youngest ever admitted to Unity's ministerial school. Graduated and was ordained at 23, and have never regretted that decision. But it was the healing for me when medical science said it's not possible. But really, it was the healing of the heart and the soul. And then I began to look at some of the books before I went on to ministerial school that my mother had tried to get me to read, and I was thought, it's just kooky stuff. And I caught it. I caught it at that point. And I love doing what I'm doing and sharing these truths that provide healing. And I love that, and it's changed my life, and all I really wanted to do was provide it. I can't change anybody else's mind or heart or life, but I can put it out there. If they like it, take it. If they don't, that's okay too. Bless them on the way to find it wherever they can find it. But that's what my life has been about for 40 years. I've been a Unity minister.